If there were a manual for life, or even a podcast, the guy in me still wouldn't follow it. I'm Andrea Leigh, and this is The Andrea Leigh Show. A little over 2 years ago, I had appeared on my first podcast. I said I wanted my own show, but I had some hurdles to clear first. Well, I've been on stages. I talk about division, the acceptance of differences. I don't always talk gender. I suppose we'll talk a little bit about that today because that's part of who I am. But what you'll find as we move forward, we're going to break stereotypes and change the narrative on something that I think the culture is growing weary of. Settle in. It's a short one today. I want to tell you my story. Don't tune out because I think you'll find it fascinating. My experience isn't what we've all been led to believe. So let me tell you the story. A little over 5 years ago, I had hung up the phone on a conversation with my parents, checking to see if they were at home, getting a yes answer. I said I was going to drop by for a visit. So Mom said, "Great, we'll be here." I drove into the neighborhood for this conversation that had been over 2 years in the making. I rounded the corner, I pulled into the drive, and I realized how much I loved going home to the house I grew up in. There were trees that were giants now. I gathered up some things from the car. I walked up the stone path, took 2 steps onto the front porch, and was met at the door by my mother, which was more often than not if she knew I was on my way, and she did today, and there she was. Greeted me with a hug and said, "Dad just left for coffee." I kind of thought, oh my goodness, I might just have to do this twice today. If your dad's like mine, that coffee's going to take 15 minutes to 2.5 hours, depending on how distracted he gets or off looking at something else. So we walk on into the house. Mom's kept it really nice and updated since I moved out, and that was a really long time ago. We walked through the living room and went to the dining room table. Everybody has some place in their house that important conversations happen, and ours was the dining room table. A lot had happened there. Cancer diagnoses and divorce announcements, things like that. And this was going to be another one. Mom is a counselor, so I thought I would use a humorous mix of his ideas regarding masculine and feminine energies, shadow work, and the process of individuation. That's becoming a whole and complete person, digging into the depths of one's own psyche. Well, all of this, and oh, by the way, my note cards. So all of this was to make it easier for me and my mother, of course, as I told her I was going to spend the rest of my life as a woman. Needless to say, Carl Jung didn't help Mom much that day. She sat there in silence, staring out the window, and tears started to well up in her eyes. And the front door opened. My dad knew I was there, so he yells, "Hey, Andy, what's going on?" Mom doesn't miss a beat and says, "Bill, you better get in here." Well, of course, you can imagine my dad's now creeping into the living room to see what's up. I got up to greet him and assured him that there was no terminal illness or impending divorce. I proceed to tell him that, well, he's a former football player, baseball player, Navy airman. And I'm now telling him I'm going to spend the rest of my life as a woman. Dad sat there looking down. He looked up at me and looked back down again, and I was silently wondering how he was going to react or respond. And when he finally did, well, he looked up at me really slow, and with tears in his eyes, he asked me an important question. "Do you still like football?" "Yeah, Dad, I still like football. I love football." And that was the point that I knew my transition was going to be okay. I felt like it was over before it ever even got started. I just needed to clear a couple of hurdles. It would have rocked my dad's world more had I said no to liking football than the news I had just delivered him that his son was in effect going to be a daughter. He had gone straight to the core of who I was, a Harley-riding, cattle-ranching, gun-carrying, mostly conservative sales exec, beginning what would be a journey to rock star fashionista, a speaker, a best-selling author, and now a podcast host. Quite a journey. Let me tell you what I'm not. I'm not an academic expert in gender studies. I've lived it. I'm not certified in DE&I, and quite frankly, I'm glad it's gone. But I have managed diversity to quite some success. And I'm damn sure not a politician. And as you've all probably noticed, we're all growing weary of the politics of division that has been fostered to help them maintain power, winning elections all at our expense, keep us divided, keep us into corners. They don't care particularly which corner you go into, you just need to pick a corner. What I am is a woman who used to be a guy on a podcast telling you things aren't quite as bad as you are being led to believe by a few on the right and a few on the left. For example, the right will continue to condemn the cancel culture, and rightly so, for those that don't align with their woke values. Yet they do fail to see the irony in their own rejection of businesses and individuals that seek to be inclusive or promote diversity, like Bud Light, however misguided that may have been, or Garth Brooks in defense of Bud Light. Now, the left continues to leverage fear with individuals and special interest groups like the Pride Alliance that they'll never be quite free to live the lives they want or be the individuals they desire to be unless the left is in power. Yet despite holding power numerous times and there being pride parades in every major U.S. and Canadian city, they continue to sell the idea that freedom is continually out of reach unless they're in power. You can see it just goes on and on. I was one of 8 white, mostly conservative guys on a team of 11. I went to each one of my teammates individually and told them of my intent to change my life, and that meant my career working with them to that of a woman's. Well, they listened, and they genuinely accepted what I had to say to them. Now, that acceptance didn't mean they agreed with what I was doing, but it certainly gave us a path forward. That's not exactly how the company reacted. They reacted in a way that said, that's great, let's put them through sensitivity training. The team could have pushed back. They didn't. They could have said it was Andy's deal, but they didn't push back. We did the sensitivity training. I led it. Not exactly HR protocol, but we got the job done. Isn't that interesting that the people that I would work with every day had responded with acceptance, yet that corporate reaction left 29,000 people outside of our team largely indifferent to what was going on inside of the team. That indifference we're going to talk about in a second, but interesting to see in action. Now, over the course of the next 4 to 6 weeks, I went to my clients, physicians, and told them of my intent to step out of the field temporarily, and when I would return, I would be a girl, not just like that. Now remember, Harley riding, cattle ranching. Responses were humorous, ranging from no shit to supportive, a lot of indifference. And something else they said to me was, I got a lot of patients that have done that. Now that one took me back because I didn't know anybody that had transitioned, not a soul. I had made my change alone, not knowing anyone. But with the number of doctors that had told me that and the number of patients they were referring to, that number was stacking up. It was later confirmed by a joint study between the CDC and the UCLA School of Law that said, well, that number in Oklahoma is about 19,000, approximately 19,000 adults that live something different than what their birth certificate says for at least 2 years. Okay, now that's a lot of people. That fills up the Paycom Center. That's the NBA arena where the Thunder play. Everybody knows somebody that goes to the Thunder games. I more than likely did know somebody. I just didn't know it. Or maybe I was just indifferent to it and didn't really notice. So I step out of the field as Andy, and I return as Andrea, the health and science specialist. Now, with that title behind your name, you're not really confusing biology and gender identity when your clients are all physicians and cardiologists and internists. You're not going to confuse biology, gender identity. Biology is what your mother is told when you're born. You have a boy, you have a girl. Gender identity I know there's a lot of talk about it in the culture and arguments and all kinds of debates that go on over it trying to make political points, but it clearly does run on a spectrum. And if you don't believe that, just look around at the airport or at the mall on a Friday night or anywhere people congregate. How easy is it to separate people into easily identifiable male and female boxes when you're out running around anymore? Not always so easy. I understood that people were trying to be accepting. I didn't have any pronoun requests. If I was asked for mine, I got to the restroom as quick as possible to check and see what I had done wrong with my makeup that day. I just spent a fortune to look like the way I wanted to be called. My family was grieving the loss of a husband, son, and father figure and the life they envisioned with him and accepting me in return. I'm now working with women who were working with a woman who used to be a guy 3 to 4 months before. So compelling acceptance with memos regarding the correct pronoun usage and the right restrooms wasn't going to speed the process up of responding with acceptance of Andrea any faster. I'd known some of the people for 20 years. It was going to take them some time. I got up and left the meetings just a little bit early to make it a little less awkward when it came time for a bio break, and eventually everybody came around. And I finished a stellar career as a man and a woman. And I retired early to pursue an opportunity in the fashion industry. But one other thing happened before I left the medical field. I was standing shoulder to shoulder with one of my clients one day, and we're observing some patient behavior from a distance. And I leaned into him and referring to the peculiar behavior, I said, "That guy, he sure is weird." And realizing the irony of what I had just said, I slowly turned to him with a smile on my face and said, "That was really ironic to hear myself say what just came out of my mouth." He doesn't miss a beat and said, "Andrea, we're all weird." And that changed everything. That one simple response from a client that I enjoyed being with and who I respected changed a perspective of mine. Diversity in the fashion industry. There's a reputation for that that's well-deserved. I inherited teams to lead that could check every box in the demographic section of a human resources form: age, race, gender, sexual preference, religious affiliation, all being led by me. And we found it rather humorous. But I was actually indifferent to those boxes that were checked. I had goals to meet. I had business plans to execute. What I found amazing was the life experience that all those people on the team brought to me as the leader to help me make well thought out, informed decisions. I was rather indifferent to the boxes. What I was looking for was that life experience. We delivered the perfectly executed business plans. Now, in that time frame, I had a couple of instances where customers chose not to work with me due to the fact that I had transitioned. And while it maybe stung a little bit, I chose not to react and add to any polarization on the topic. But I was rather happy with it pretty quick because I'd been operating under the assumption, based on this little study of one being me, that nobody cared. But what I realized is that some people do care, and some people care deeply. It's just that most people are indifferent, and therein lies something big. When you realize that people are indifferent to you, that people are more self-absorbed into their own lives than to be concerned or focused on what's going on in yours, you will find a freedom. In that indifference, it's what I call a compassionate indifference. It's an indifference that says, basically, you've got your stuff, I've got mine, I'm not judging you, I don't want you to judge me. In that indifference, what you're going to find is freedom. It's a freedom to be yourself without a fear of judgment. And it's rather empowering. So, I've got family seeking reassurance that the important things in life will remain unchanged, like the love of football. I've got colleagues unfazed with the gender swap, want to keep stacking up wins with me on the team. I've got clients telling me I'm not alone, the others are just stealthy and not on the news and social media like you are, Andrea, and besides, we're all weird. And I've got two amazing experiences taking chic fashion to the women of Oklahoma and Texas. So my experience isn't what I was led to believe it would be by a few on the left and a few on the right. That I wouldn't be welcome, that I wouldn't be supported, that I would be ostracized, that I would live in fear. Yet here I am, spending time on stages, writing best-selling books, answering questions, non-polarizing, bringing people together, and realizing there's a place for people that want to hear what I have to say because no one's saying it. So that's what we're going to do here. Now, transition isn't normal, but in a culture where obesity is the norm, crushing debts everywhere, and half the marriages end in divorce, I'm not so sure what's normal is good. People have asked me to help them understand. I really can't to help them understand, and I tell them that. Sometimes people, maybe even myself, barely understand myself. But here's what I do know, is that while we don't always have the ability to control how we initially react or respond to people different than us, we do get to choose how we will move forward. Will we further divide, or will we accept that some people are just different? That acceptance doesn't mean we have to agree with them. It just gives us a path forward. My dad, well, he has macular degeneration. That means he doesn't see me very well. So he calls me Andrea, refers to me as he. Could have let the news of the transition years ago just tear us apart. But he went straight to the core of who I was and let this mutual love of football keep us together. As we go forward, I'm going to encourage us all to see the humor in everybody's journeys. I want you to realize that the meaning and purpose of life is found in the experience of it. And that if you want to discover the meaning and purpose of life, you better find some new experiences to say yes to. This is the Andrea Leigh Show. We'll be right back. Welcome back. Podcast episode number 1 is in the bag. Thanks for being here. The book, Do You Still Like Football? Still top on the charts. Get in and you'll learn a little bit about me. You'll learn about how I got to the point of the story I just told you. It's a great read. You're going to love it. There's a reason why we're changing the narrative and we're breaking stereotypes. You'll find it in there. I love you guys. Until next time.